Alright, so this is going, and this is my, this is a proprietary algorithm, I believe it is. Yeah, my, procedural generation proprietary algorithm course, where we had to basically prototype our own, proprietary procedural generation algorithm to create something like this. So for me, I chose a sort of Minecrafty-like game. As you can see here, you got your hills, or your cliffs, dips, a little hard to see, but you got your water, and then it goes down a bit. You can see the stone, dirt. It looks kind of similar to much more hilly than what you might see in Minecraft, but bad. And when you hit the R button, it'll regenerate it again, following the same rules of you get highs and lows, and if you're if the project goes if they generate at a specific like I'm trying to think of the word height, it'll generate water, and then I have sand that's supposed to generate around it. You have a path that'll go through it. If it runs into water, it'll go around it instead of disappearing or going through it. You've got all the hills and cliffs. And if I actually bring it up in Unity here and show it, it's very laggy, but yeah, as you can see, it generates. The water isn't working properly because all of these all these like grass blocks around the water are supposed to be water as well, but for some reason they're not generating properly. I'm not 100% certain why, because I don't know if there's something clashing in my code or whatever, but it's not quite working the way it should. Cause yeah, like especially again here, all of this, all these grass blocks should be water, but they're not for some reason. Same with here and here, although you can see it works sometimes, and I'm moving blocks around now. All right, we're gonna stop that. I'll just open that back up while I talk. So for this project, what went wrong with it? And I kind of want to say everything, just because this was honestly kind of really difficult to figure out without it looking like a mess, which it still doesn't look great. But if I had to choose one thing specifically, I think probably the water generation, just because it's the only thing that's not quite working the way I wanted it to, and I have no idea why. I've tried going through and figuring it out, and I'm just not certain what's going on with it. And what went right with this project? Again, not really much. Like the easiest part was just making the prefabs of all these cubes and then linking them into my inspector. But yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything specifically that went right with this project because it took me quite a while of working on it to figure out what I was doing, and I was going back and forth between different tutorials, trying to figure out what they were doing, and looking at examples online, and then trying to take that, and see how I could adapt it into my own version and get something similar working. What did I learn from this? Honestly, just how to take information that I learned from tutorials online, different examples, and then adapt it into my own work to generate something sort of cool. And can others learn from you? I guess test your projects a lot while you're working on them. I wasn't testing this very frequently, so when I got decent ways into it and finally tested it, nothing was working. So I had to spend ages trying to just go back through my code and figure out why and what it was that was causing it. I should have been testing the whole time, but I just was getting so into typing, going through my code and typing things out, and just did not think to go back and forth with that. But yeah, overall, I like what I created. It's not perfect, but it's a decent enough piece that I could potentially show off. Not sure in what aspect I want to show it off, but I think it's okay. It definitely needs some work. There's a lot of areas that just aren't working the way they should. But yeah, that's really how this project went. Stuff I wish was better, but this project was pretty difficult to figure out.